Having been to all three of these Digital CMC Summits, I'm confident that I'm somewhat of a familiar face to the majority of the crowd. But for those of you who I have not met yet, my name is Lewis Shipp. I wear a couple of different hats at QbDVision: scientist, salesperson, boo, and all-round British optimist alongside many other colleagues and friends. As an official member of Gen Z, even though I know I do not look like it, and a pharmaceutical scientist by trade, I've always been curious about the technological possibilities within drug development and manufacturing. Perks of being an iPad child, I guess, and I've still got it today. So it's my absolute pleasure to both introduce and moderate this session, connecting the digital CMC ecosystem. I'm going to keep this brief for two reasons. Firstly, because the presenters we've lined up today are far more interesting than myself. But secondly, because I'm saving my voice for karaoke later tonight. Any of you want details? Come find me afterwards. With that said, this session will feature two presentations. One diving into the strategic imperative to digitally transform manufacturing operations and the immense value that that unlocks, and another that charts an ambitious digital roadmap for a trailblazing gene therapy company. Both touch on the organizational, cultural, and mindset shifts required to truly transform a company, which, as all of us here today understand, are vital in securing the long-term success of transformation initiatives, digital or otherwise. Personally, I think the word ecosystem is befitting both of the session itself, as well as how I know all of us in the room today think about the technology landscape within drug development and manufacturing. A carefully balanced network of interconnected systems versus one solution to rule them all. I'm hopeful that what you'll all take from this session is further proof that point solutions and/or siloed integrations between two systems pale in comparison to a cohesive, well-thought-out digital strategy, incorporating a collection of best-in-class solutions whose implementation and integrations are aligned with key business outcomes. There will be a short Q&A towards the end of the session, which I invite you all to participate in. But for now, let's dive in. The first session, titled The Digital Roadmap, Architecting Scalable CMC Operations with QbDVision Integration, will be presented by Bill Pizzuti from AskBio. Bill has worked in the pharmaceutical industry for over 15 years in R&D and process development at companies like Merck, Novartis, and now AskBio. In his current role as Associate Director of Data Science, he leads a company-wide effort in creating digital roadmaps and connecting data sources within preclinical manufacturing, process development, and MSAT. His efforts are meant to improve communication and collaboration through digitalization and promote data-driven decision-making. So, come on up, Bill.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so I'll talk today about the digital roadmap. First, I'll just give a brief bio about myself. So, first half of career, I did assay development. The second half, I did data science. So, assay development, that was my time in California for about 10 years. Got to work in the lab, and basically, in research and development, they want a lot of information. So make those assays high throughput. So it was collecting a lot of information. And that kind of led me in towards data science, and kind of moved also from R&D into process development, now into manufacturing. And this I saw in a book recently. Maybe some of you have actually read this book or seen this, from Michael Walken's First 90 Days. It was kind of a nice summary of kind of pharma company life cycle, or any company life cycle. And I've actually been through all of these stages. I remember remember working at a startup, and small group, 7 people, raise some Series A money, and kind of move on. So you go through growth cycle, and you're successful. Or most of the time you just fail. Like maybe like 1 out of 10 startups can make it, but once you kind of get to here, that's great. And you want to continue to grow, so you add more departments, maybe more sites, more companies, and you're going through this growth cycle. Now, what happens when you get too many? It gets confusing. There's miscommunication among the groups, so you have to go through this recovery cycle of realignment, and that's kind of getting towards this map that you need to have to kind of realign and guide people. Because if you don't, you go to this crisis cycle. Now you need like a captain to steer the ship around saying, all hands on deck. And if you don't, People see that if you're going to fail, they'll start jumping ship, going to another company, and the boat sinks, or you go to shutdown. Or if you're successful, you go back here, and you can go back in the growth cycle. So we want to, go on the next slide here. We want to bring, we're often in this recovery cycle for most of us. We're trying to bring in all these different groups and departments and have them kind of work together. And we all know that. We want to be aligned. And so right here, these are kind of departments that we're looking at. AskBio started as an R&D company, and now starts working with manufacturing, Biogen. So I know Isabel knows a lot about this relationship over the years. And what's happened in the past couple of years, these other departments kind of squeezed in here, especially MSAT, that's the one I just joined, to kind of help streamline this kind of workflow. And so that's why we're making this digital roadmap to help us align. So my first year, 2024, it's like I went to talk to all the departments. So that's not just process development and MSAT, QA, analytical development, IT, facilities, supplies, quality. And I said, oops, let me go back. Oh, it does not go back. There we go. So I put down these little tiles, and I said, can you arrange these tiles? How are they most important to you? And then in the end, after 6 months of discussions and so many meetings with all these groups, we kind of mapped it out like this, and we started putting boxes around applications that we have. So, QbDVision, we define our platform product, fit it to a process, and there's a batch. You execute it in the lab. You put it in an ELN LIMS system, and you can do sample management here. And when you're in the lab collecting results, you have like 3 main resources. You have to get your equipment, materials, and samples kind of all together. And so we've had to identify all these applications and tie them together, which we did. So we made a map in a year, and we made the digital connections and forwarded all the data into one source or one location. And so here's an example of the 4 applications I was talking about earlier. We have our equipment, something called Asset Essentials. NetSuite is where our materials are for supply chain. And now QbDVision is where we're going to define a process map, or any method, really. And you're going to just forward this into benchling. So API calls, they're just, connect data. They forward data. And once we did this, it was like a quick win. Because a lot of people, all of R&D, process development are all in benchling. And when all of a sudden they saw this data come in, they were just like, that's great. Now we have all the equipment and materials. Why didn't we do this before? Why? Because they're sending emails. They're trying to find out where the data was. When we start connected to QbDVision, people are like, what is this? So now we're in the process. It took about a year to stand this up, to get it ready for a production-ready environment. And I'll say many of QbD helped us kind of do some early trainings. As I said, Ben Ober, you helped us with some of the early trainings to get everyone on board to understand this. And the other thing that I like about connecting systems is the barcoding. There's barcodes everywhere. There's barcodes on your tags, to get things. One way to reduce human error is just have people enter data with a barcode scanner. So every record that goes in comes from this application, or every record from material, every even component, every process parameter, attribute, material sample that is defined here is a barcode. And all of those, when you enter them in, can get scanned in. And it improves accuracy. Not only that, when somebody is doing a process, they know right away the exact equipment time and when it was used and materials used. And that goes into this central knowledge of understanding your capital budget and understanding the resources it takes and the value for every experiment you do. And when you collect that information, it's valuable. So just a quick example of how we connect the QbD to benchling. So here's from the sandbox. This is a monoclonal antibody project that they provided. And you could have a parameter, or material, or a process component, sample, whatever. Each one of these is a record, and we just forward it into benchling right here. And all the metadata is just there, so it's kind of like a mirror. So when people are in the lab, they say, hey, what's this from QbD? They can just add lookup things saying, oh, okay, I see it's Unidop 148, capture chromatography, and I'm looking at an ACTA. And they just scan in the equipment that they use and put in the time. And now we know that instrument is reserved for this particular project at this certain time, and and we accumulate all that data. Also, Alcoa, yes. So putting URLs back to the source is always a great thing. So if somebody doesn't know what this is, they just click here, and things kind of match. And that's the idea of just mirroring the two. And all of a sudden, people are like, oh, I know what QbD is now, because they're in a system that they understand, and they see the data that they knew before, and it's all together. So reducing complexity in data silos is the big thing that we tried to do here. So, okay, everybody's aware that if you go through every department, they have over 250 schemas. And what's a schema? Think Excel sheet with a whole bunch of columns. So how many tables do we have? Probably thousands, but 250 is a generous number. And you ask people, like, can you get me some historic data? Can you tell me about this? When did you use this instrument in this time? Nobody can do that. They're like, are you crazy? That'll take me forever to dig that up. So we reduced it down to just 8 schemas. That's 8 tables for all the departments, no department-specific things, because if you define things well in QbD, any method, it can be a process analytical method or just how to make a buffer, it's going through the same format. When it goes into benchling, it's just one work template, and the 8 schemas are only entering data into 4. So QbDVision template workflows. So what is a project? So a project in QbD, I think of it as a container for all the information related to a particular product. So any kind of program, if you're doing a design of experiments, you're going to do probably about 30 experiments trying to identify maybe 6 critical process parameters for a target quality attribute. And you want to plan all that out and you kind of categorize it. And you can do that in QbD and make a template and execute those accordingly. And with assay development and developing methods. Well, it's a product. It's the final output of a process. So drug product, of course, that could be a buffer. Or plasmids. Plasmids are important in gene therapy because that is what is the blueprint of your product. And we make them sometimes in-house. That needs to have a process method. We need to know all the materials and equipment, everything that goes into it, and track it as if it was commercial. And analytical results, the same thing with your method. The output is just the result, and you want to trust that result. And you need to know where it came from and how it got there. And a process is a sequence of steps and operations involved in creating a product. So examples would be a manufacturing process or buffer recipe or analytical method. And pointing out the process features that in QbD really helps kind of structure this. Your process components are, I like to think of as equipment, materials, inputs and outputs, parameters, quality attributes. So data governance. Now that we have this whole map, think of these as pipes, the data pipeline, flowing information. And right where I put that red arrow, that is a valve. So before somebody wants to run a batch, first, you'd be like, you know how much that batch costs? Probably 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, maybe $1 million, depending on the scale that you're going to do. And when you open that valve, you're using resources, equipment, material, labware, FTEs, all flood in to get that information. And so you definitely want to control it right there and have everybody go into QbD and look at the process, approve it, make sure it has been approved. You move it to a certain project, you lock it, so it's nobody can write over it, and that's kind of a good way of quality to know that we can trust this data. And again, it's in the QbDVision's validated environment. So the other thing that's really important, I'm going to go back one. Before you start an experiment, you always have to show a report. You have to say, what do we know? What have we done? Can we collect all the historic information? Because, again, that's information's cost. So review historic data before making more data. So here's somebody. They did 3 experiments, n equals 3. And here's the statistics from a siloed and incomparable data. So if somebody worked really hard in these 3 experiments and say, you know what, I think I got something. I'm going to put up a graph. Here it is. Now all of you tell me, what is it? Actually, take a guess. I want to know. Each? Yeah, very good. But yeah, that's the idea. It's just when you add more information, statistics at an enterprise-aligned scale makes adds clarity. So we were talking earlier, it's like, could I get data from 2 different platforms or 3 different platforms? How many, if I was looking for a certain parameter? Well, if everything is well organized and structured, you can do the analysis. Maybe you can do like an ANOVA test or a t-test and say, among these 3 groups, platform 1, 2, 3, are they different? Maybe they're not. Then we can pull them together. And for whatever question that you have, you're now gathering more information to give it more statistical, competence. And that's valuable because you want to extract every bit of information out of these batches and experiments that you do. And since you're running this in parallel among so many different departments that are siloed and not communicating with each other, now everybody has it together. So last, and this goes with Isabel's talk, is how can we streamline tech transfers and with the nomenclature alignment. So in the red arrow, this is kind of sender receiver, AskBio, Virogen, working together in QbD, just making sure we do a proper tech transfer and find the gaps. And then one thing I'm just recently discovered in QbD, there's a thing called integration mapping, which is basically you could just tag your data and call it something else. So system 1 might be AskBio, system 2 might be Virogen. What do they call this parameter at AskBio? What do they call it at Virogen? Once all that's in one kind of place, you can automate the data extraction of that. And it makes it easier to show what data would look like in an AskBio language into a Virogen language. And again, working with Virogen data science to kind of make sure that we can automate and streamline the data flows from our Loom systems together into kind of one data warehouse so we can share insights. And not just with Virogen, but also within our own company as well. Yeah, and that's it. And so I just have lots of departments and acknowledgments here. I won't say all of their names, but I just want to say, it's great to work with MSAT, process development, or IT group. I know I listed there twice by accident. Preclinical manufacturing and QC80 contracts, CSV and external manufacturing and Virogen. All of us kind of came together to make sure we mapped this out and came to an agreement of like what would this data flow be. And it's still more people I think to come, and there's more to do. But I think we're coming on the right track. That's all.
Okay, that was a great session. Personally, it's pretty cool to see all of the cool stuff Bill is doing over at AskBio with QbDVision, but also in driving broader digital CMC transformation. Reducing the number of schemas that they're currently managing from 250 to like 8 is about a 97% reduction. Nobody check my math there, I just made that up. That kind of business process simplification is one of the key benefits of integrations, but also digital strategy that is often maybe overlooked in terms of some of the hard-line quantitative metrics, but I think it is an important one nonetheless. So the next and final session of today's talk will be presented, or actually will be titled, Revolutionizing Digital Operations Beyond EBR. And this will be presented by Andy Zhang and Tim Adkins. So Tim is a director of digital life science operations at ZAETHER, serving the life science industry by assisting companies reach their desired business outcomes through digital IT and OT solutions. He has 30 years of industry experience as an IT and OT leader in global operational improvements and support, manufacturing system design, and implementation programs. Andy Zhang is a data solution architect working at ZAETHER who strives to grow and develop cutting-edge solutions in industrial automation and life science. And he has over 5 years of experience within the software automation field, providing innovative solutions to customers which improve process efficiency. So, come on up, guys.
Good morning. Oh, we have a bigger crowd than I thought we were going to have, actually. Earlier it was looking pretty thin. So we're going to get started on revolutionizing digital operations beyond EBR. I'm going to jump right into it here. So first of all, today's biopharma is not your mama's biopharma. right? So it's very different than what it was in the past. And what I mean by that is, we're used to like MABs, where we could build a plant to make one specific product, or maybe make 2 or 3 with a platform. We'd spend a lot of time and energy doing that, and the tech transfers to do that. And all of that came with a lot of pain and a lot of cost. And we're still going to see that, right? For sure that's going to happen. But at the same time, now we have cell and gene therapy, which bring a whole different animal to the whole equation, right? And so in that context, the systems that and the processes we put in place to take care of large-scale manufacturing is not the same as we're going to need to accommodate for cell and gene therapy. So we're going to need to think about that differently. And on top of just the market changing, in addition to that, you've got all these external pressures, the pricing pressures and such that are happening, as well as just getting materials available. Tariffs and such like that is going to make that even a little more challenging. So a lot there to work through. So this starting with the why. So now as far as a new mindset, so it's interesting. I think when we had Doug on the other night, a whole different perspective on things that maybe what we have, and yet there's a lot of commonality there as well. One thing that I found interesting is when Elon Musk said, "Thou shalt have basically a touch screen, and you'll do everything from that." I mean, that was kind of crazy, right? But it was a vision. He had a vision for sure, and he wanted. It's interesting is he wanted to be aesthetic, right? Which I find that interesting since we've got these cyber trucks on the road, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But there was a clear vision there. And I think what we have to think about this is very differently is not just about implementing systems to be able to manufacture products, but we've got to think about this from a big picture perspective and think about it more holistically than what we have in the past. All the challenges that we're dealing with, they're not going to slow down. They're just going to get continually worse over time, right? And I'm not here for not doomsday by any means, but we just know that's the reality. So we need to deal with this and think about it in a different way. And so we need to be thinking about it in the context of digital operations, moving from manufacturing operations to digital operations. Now, what I mean by that is that's systems, it's technology, it's people, and it's process. And I can tell you can throw in a bunch of technology, and if you don't change your process to align to that, and you don't train your people properly and go through proper change management, it's going to fail, right? We all know that. There's lots of failures across that we can all speak to. But in this context, we want to think about it, kind of have a different mindset from a data perspective, that there's systems that are on the market today that are designed specifically for us. They're designed for biopharma, they're designed for the science, and they're built up from the data up in that context. Very different than in the past and what we had to deal with. Some of the legacy systems we had have been much challenging to accommodate what we needed to do, but those systems aren't going to take us to where we need to go now. So in this, I've had the Manufacturing Data Hub. That's really just a kind of cohesive glue, if you would, to kind of tie these systems together. Unified namespace, I'm sure that's something you all know. UNS, that's one area, one way we see that to kind of tie these together, have more publish subscribe model, very different, more of a data fabric than what we have today. So we're going to take, we've all said we've got to do this in bite sizes, right? So this is one bite size, one specific use case we're going to show you today. It's going to be taking bill of parameters from QbDVision and moving those into a commercial MES system. It's L7 ESP. So with that said, we're going to just jump real quickly. So I want to describe what you're going to see, and you're going to see just a small piece of this, but just some context, is the way MESs are built in general is you've got master recipes that are built generically that can make multiple products, right? So we'll just, for this context, let's say this is a media, something simple. So we've got a media recipe that's for single-use mixer, and the only thing that's different about making one media from another is the data, right? It's the parameters, the bill of material, CQAs, CPPs, all those things that need to get pulled in. And the challenges in the past, the only place we really had to store that data was MES. And that's fine, and it works fine, but at the same time, it created just additional silos. We took what was on paper and just created digital silos. And in that context, we created a lot of challenges with tech transfer documents and all the, spreadsheets and Word documents and all that where the data lived, and then you got to transcribe it into the MES, which created a lot of challenges, not obviously very collaborative in that context. So this is what it would typically look like today. If you're trying to do the transcribing, you've got to get documents approved, you've got to get everything in order from MSAT, PD, and then you start. Someone from yesterday, I forget now, Isabel, I think it was talking about the collaboration, the meetings after meetings after meetings, where you all get together and talk about all the data that you've got in documents. Thank you very much. That you move that now into an MES, and you've got to go through all that process of verification and making sure that it's all accurate, because obviously from a quality perspective, that has to be done. But it's quite painful. I've been through this many times in my career, and I can tell you this is a very painful process. We're going to show you. So again, this is something that it's not sustainable, right? We have to think about this differently. We have to do it differently than what we've done in the past. And I'm going to have Andy is going to show you a little bit about an actual video on this.
Yeah, appreciate it, Tim. So what I have for you today is an integration that we built out between QbDVision to the L7 MES. And what we've done is we've taken the existing robust API that QbDVision has provided us and kind of built like a point-to-point integration to pass down the bill of parameters from QbDVision all the way to L7. And we'll be walking through that in the video that we have today. So what we have here is our digital process definition of a 50-liter single-use bioreactor that we built out specifically for the summit here. What we've taken is what are traditionally paper documents like what Tim was mentioning, like PDFs, Excels, and Word, and all transcribing it into one source of truth, which you can see is the commercial inoculation process that I have here below. This process that we've built is going to be the single source of truth that we're going to utilize to pass down the information. And specifically in this case, we're going to be looking at the inoculation day 0 unit operation. And underneath this, we have a few steps that some of them contain the process parameters. And in this case, we're going to be looking at the sub-inoculation step that has 2 process parameters we'll be looking at. One of them is our actual working volume. And if we scroll down, we have some acceptance criteria values. And then here as well, we have some values that we're capturing. We're also capturing some sampling ranges, which we have here. Things like glucose results, viability, lactate results, and a bunch of different process parameters that we're capturing here that we're planning to pass down to L7 itself. The reason that we built out this integration is mainly because we want to eliminate the process of having to manually transcribe information from QbDVision to other platforms, right? That often results in human error. You have transcription, somebody fat fingers something, and some data gets lost. So this pipeline that we implemented here is going to update the values in real time to the other systems. So what we have here is our L7 system. It is a data management platform that has several features like sampling, electronic notebook. It also has scheduling capabilities. But the one we're looking at today is the manufacturing execution system, which is what we're going to be clicking on here. Within the manufacturing execution system, we have several records, as you can see here. And we can create a new batch record that's going to be connected to our QbDVision system. So what we're going to do is click on the new batch record. We're going to type the name, CMC Summit, version 01. And we're going to choose the product of our test product. And once we've chosen the product that we want, we're going to select the version of it, and then choose the project that we've integrated with, which is the 50-liter single-use bioreactor. That's in the general plan itself. And then we're going to create. Once this has been created, we can see the new batch record has been done. And in here, you can see that we have the values that we've passed down from QbDVision all the way to L7 itself. So you can see those little ranges. Not sure if I can't read that. Is the 40 to 48, 35 to 42. And those values are being passed in real time from QbDVision to L7 itself. And you can also see here that we also have the sampling ranges that we're also passing down in the values itself. So let's say in this scenario, you've done this batch run as an engineering run, and you want to go back and then make a change to one of those values, right? What we've done is we've actually built out the integration so that if you are making a change to the values, you can go back to QbDVision, make that change, approve the change, and then the value will now be updated when you create a new batch record in it. So let's say in this scenario, we've got an engineering run, and then now we're making a revision here. So what we do here is we click on Edit Last Draft, and then we scroll down. Yeah, previous me was pretty slow with this. I'm really taking my time here. And then we can go to our commercial value here. So what we have here is a 0.065 value. And let's just say we're going to change it after we did the first engineering run to 0.062. Once that's been done, we can now scroll up and then save the draft itself. So to kind of represent like a GMP environment, what we want to do is we don't want to pass down the drafted values because somebody could randomly, change a value or something that could potentially impact the real-time information that's being passed down to L7. So what we've done to make this integration kind of closer to GMP environment is that before you can even pass down the values to L7, you actually have to approve it to the next major version. So right now, that version of the parameters is in version 1. And once we approve it, it'll go into version 2, and then L7 will be able to pick up those values and then pass it down to appropriately be used for the next batch run. So once this has been done, I'm just going to skip over the fact that I cut, and then now you see that we're in version 2. And then in here, you can see the value has now changed to 0.062. So now if we go back to L7 and run a new batch record, you'll see that the value that is being portrayed here in QbDVision is now going to properly reflect in the new batch record that you're running. So what we're going to do is create a new batch record, and let's just call it CMC Summit V02. And then choose our same test product, and then choose the same version, and then choose basically the project that we've integrated with. And you can see the new batch record here. And then finally, if we go down here, you see that the parameter has changed from 0.062. So kind of summarizing here, what we've done is eliminated the factor of having to manually take that information from QbDVision and then basically implant it into the other systems. So this currently we've set up is for only the L7 system, but we've done several other integrations that also work similar ways where we can have that real-time data updates from this. So with that being said, that is the demo here. Pass it back to Dim.
Thank you, Andy. Great job. So, you guys aren't excited to see that? I mean, because seriously, I get goosebumps every time I see it because I've been in these situations where it's just horrible to get through. And this is so much easier, right? Look at all the things that just go away, right? You still got to get the information into QbDVision, and you got to get it approved. And then guess what? You're done. Next time you drop an order from SAP to your ERP or to your MES, boom, you're ready for the next run. I mean, crazy, right? This is great stuff. It's really exciting stuff. So I hope you're as excited as I am. So all this stuff goes away. Fantastic. So now what we have, and again, we'll go to the big picture in a minute, but to think about for the moment, we've talked about over the course of the last day or so is hitting things a bite at a time, right? Which Project Artemis and all the other things, obviously with what Doug was speaking to as well, it all had to be done in small teams with a vision, right? And all these small teams coming together to do one thing. So this is just one area, right? And what you saw with a little snippet of what's capable of. But in the context of having your knowledge management, your PLM tied into an orchestration system that's kind of built from the ground up to do what we do every day, along with the people in the process. So we can't forget that, right? It's not just about throwing in the technology, because I can tell you it will not last very long. You definitely will fail in the long run. But you got to first of all look at your process, modify your process, think about it in the context of the tools you now have available to you. What does that look like? How does that tie into your digital vision? And then make sure that the people are trained, right? Make sure that they know what they need to do, look at the personas that have been impacted by it, go through proper change management to make sure that that they have all the training they need and they've been communicated with properly, and that, again, the whole idea here is that at the end of the day, you end up with the right data with the right person at the right time, right? And that's what we're looking for. Last slide, bring it back to the kind of the big picture. The mindset change here has to happen in order for us to really succeed well in the future. Not to say that you can't fumble along, but the days of brute force where you just kind of, put your head down and get things through, it's tough. It's a tough way to do it, right? So what we need to be thinking about is thinking about in the context of these digital operations where you've got systems, you've got process, people and technology together that make this all work. The procedural side of this obviously is important, but thinking about this in the context of the end user, which in some cases you would say is the patient. Of course it is, right? We want to get there the fastest that we can to get those drugs to market. But when we think about it in the context of, go back to Elon Musk again, where the person on the shop floor, let's think about them better context than what we have in the past, right? They have to get this stuff done. And it's a lot of work to get it done. It's a lot to know. And, they're very talented people, but we need to make it simpler for them. And I think in this whole context, this is something to think about. Obviously, when all this stuff is together, right? Let's go scroll ahead 5, 10 years from now, whatever it takes to get this done. The capabilities here are endless. I mean, from a data, and I know, Josh, I will tell you that I know I don't say anything about knowledge, but you got to have the data first, right? So we got the data, we got in context, we've got everything that's needed to build those knowledge models that Josh was talking about, right? And so in that context, all the things you're able to do, some of these stuff we've talked about most of these things we've talked about in the last few days, but to me, it's like, what can you dream up? If you have all this data, what can you dream up? What can you do next? It's endless. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so another great talk by the guys at ZAETHER. Now, we are a little ahead of schedule. That's why Luke is looking at me over there smiling, as opposed to frowning. But I think, and one of the things that is quite interesting to me personally is when we talk about the technological possibilities and the current state of digital within pharma, that we've now risen to a state where the technology exists. It's there. There are many systems and many tools and many APIs that we can build and many integrations. But now, how do you operationalize that? And how do you build strategies to actually implement that in your own respective organizations? So I think Tim and Andy did a great job of both showing the technological possibilities, but also alluding to some of the strategy behind that and how they operationalize that for their clients. So now we will jump into the Q&A. I know you're all dying to ask questions now that you've probably woken up with these very exciting demonstrations and presentations. So I will invite everybody who has spoken today to come back up onto the stage with me, and we will take your questions. So come back up, folks. Okay, so now that we got all of the gang back up on the stage, I know this is supposed to be your Q&A, but I might selfishly kick us off with one of my own. So this one is for Bill. You've obviously received endorsement from the leadership within AskBio to both design and now implement this strategy for CMC digital transformation. So I'm curious to get your thoughts of how important you believe aligning with and getting endorsement from leadership to design and execute these strategies is, in both getting them off the ground, but also ensuring their long-term success. And any sort of tips you can provide along the way, I'm sure will be grateful for the audience as they look to do this in their own respective organizations.
Yeah, getting endorsement from leadership is absolutely important. It helps, let the company know that this is kind of a direction that we want to go. So the head of MSAT, Abel Hastings, who I report to, is when he, I think, first noticed QbDVision last year when we were looking at it, I think he actually got it right away. He's worked on the CDMO side and on the other, and kind of see how this is important. And with that, kind of sharing that with the rest of the leadership kind of gave the project momentum. And then me just being kind of middle management, just kind of at least working with the meetings, getting the groups together, and kind of keeping track on things.
Yeah, awesome. So I'll open it up to you guys. Who wants to take a stab? Oh, Matt.
Hi, Matt Schultz. Bill, this is a question for you. Would you be able to kind of like talk through the approach of how you did like the mapping and the adjacent work with the other systems, particularly benchling? And is that a direct integration, or are the two systems working side by side, and like the scientists are kind of like working across two systems, but now you're capturing data in QbDVision, so that's why the schemas were able to be reduced?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they are separate. So in QbDVision, all the data is entered there, and then we just pull it out, like read-only, and then it's just written once into benchling, and that's it. So we kind of record those events when it got transferred. If somebody changes something in QbD and wants it updated, we can do that. But in benchling, the idea is this is where you execute the experiment, and having it simplified to just 8 schemas means that it can work for all the departments. Because we want to use buffers, for example, in our process. There's 30 or more buffer recipes. And sometimes, and there's 3 different floors running all these buffer recipes at once. So if we were to have a buffer core and you just write a buffer recipe and you say at what scale, 50 liters, 100 liters, whatever, anybody can kind of run that recipe. It's standardized.
Cool. Anybody else? No? Busy bunch today. Let's go.
I have a question. Hi, it's for Tim and Andy. So I am very excited about the integration you shared. I think a good clarification is it's not a substitute for the change control process, right? You still need to open a change control and go through the justification to make the change, but change control cycle time is really where we're going to see a huge difference there. I mean, I myself, working through updating specs or process parameters in industry, I update my PFD, 5 different tables in the document management system, 5 different tables in Excel, and then I update my MES system as well. So that is all very exciting. Now, when I talk to clients about integrating, let's say, SAP ERP with a solution like QbDVision and MES, the question of process orders always comes up, because there's this never-ending question of how do we group process orders to then call on MES to execute the recipe against them. Is it 1 per many unit operations? Is it 1 process order per unit operation? So have you guys come across that challenge, and what do you tell your clients? Did they go down a rabbit hole of wanting to kind of organize the whole thing?
Great question.
Hey, that was a long one. Thank you.
Yes, I have definitely seen this. So I think this is part of the big picture. You have to kind of look at ERP and see how it's structured. And quite frankly, I guess probably many people in the room have SAP, but not everybody does. And so those are differences between the different systems as well. But having the ability to generally group from a product perspective, right? But then you think about it from mapping that to an MES and how those various recipes, you got the big picture, but you've got a product ID and that's the way I think about it, generally speaking, the ERP, and try to think about that, even though it's maybe 15, 20 different recipes that have to be executed. So but I think about it on the process order side, it's one product, but it's one production order, one process order per recipe. That's typically the way I would see it done. It seems to be cleaner, at least from my perspective and experience, it's been that way. So that's what I would generally see. I'm not going to say that's the only answer or it's maybe always the best answer. In some cases, when we start thinking about cell and gene therapy, they could definitely be different there, for sure. So I don't know if that answers the question specifically, but yeah, it's evolving for sure.
And I can speak a bit on the technical side of the deal as well, is that, I mean, in QbDVision, there is integrations mapping that you can set up to structure exactly where you want to pass in or pass out data, right? Is kind of figuring out exactly, what context you want to capture from the different project or the process or the unit operation level, right? And then having that integration mapping saying, hey, at this point, you want to integrate these points of data to SAP, or this is what you're looking for at the SAP point, and then what you're extracting to the MES. You can also have a secondary integration mapping saying, hey, now these are the points that I want to pass down to the MES system, and then that can integrate to, you have one system in to QbDVision, then you have one system out, and then the clarification of what exact data you're pulling out can be identified at those mapping points.
Anybody?
So, question for Bill. You talked about all the different departments and whatnot that are kind of involved in, stakeholders in your digital roadmap. With your new digital strategy, can you talk a little bit about how your digital first strategies maybe changed, or kind of the benefits that you guys are looking to see in terms of collaboration across those departments?
Yeah, it's a good question. First, when we set this platform up, it's like, let's do the whole process. Everyone's like, I don't have time to learn a new thing in this amount of time. Can you make it simpler? I'm like, okay. So that's why I mentioned buffers are a sample plan. And so the start is, I know you guys have 30 buffers. So let's write one buffer recipe. And let's just go through it step by step. I mean, whenever you guys have time, I'll go walk in the lab with you, and we'll see how it works on the benchling side, and go to QbD with everyone, how to enter it. That takes about 6 weeks just to do a simple use case. And then once they see it, it's easy, because then all the other buffers fall in place. All 50 of them can be done probably in a quarter of the time. And then everybody gets the workflow. And after that, they'll start doing processes. Or maybe they'll do column packing or other kind of like analytical methods. They'll think of other things that they're like, oh, I have this in a document, visualize it, and now I can capture all of this easily.
Yeah, it's interesting. I might jump back in now with one for the ZAETHER folks. So you obviously demonstrated that the digital process definition defined in QbDVision can go to L7, ESP, or MES. What happens if you work for one of the enterprise organizations in the audience today who may have different MES systems in different manufacturing sites all over the world? Does this kind of concept of the integration fail, or are you still able to get the same level of efficiencies across a network of manufacturing sites with the same sort of principles you talked about today?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start it, and Andy can probably add some more flavor to it. But I think absolutely that there's no limit to which MES we're talking about. Obviously, today we chose one specific. We've integrated with at least one other so far, and we've got another one on the table right now. So it's not a challenge going from one MES to the other. And in some cases, some companies may have more than one MES, right? Depending on where they're at from a global perspective. Different one in the EU than they have in the US, and that the same principles still apply.
Yeah. And anything to jump in?
And I would say, like, honestly, yeah, the sky's the limit with that stuff, right? I mean, you can go integrate as much as you want, as deep as you want, and as detailed as you want. And I mean, like Tim said, right? We have figuring out how to structure and organize the data into the centralized data hub where you can pass information in and out without having to, have those point-to-point solutions and integrating to other platforms as well, right? And I mean, speaking on behalf of ZAETHER as well, like what we've been developing is kind of that centralized data hub where we're looking to pass information not just to the MES, but like to the control center, to the ELN, to connect to other platforms that can all contextualize that information together into into kind of that well-meshed data structure.
Yeah, awesome. The sky's the limit. Space is the limit, maybe. The moon, Mars.
Let's go to the moon.
Let's go to the moon. Let's to infinity and beyond. Luke?
Nope. There we go. Got two mics on, so it's a little tricky. I know, Louis, you're wearing the Pharma Geek shirt, but I also know on the stage we have two pretty big API geeks. But on the other side, I've sort of seen both Bill and Andy really get in and dive in with either RPA, API or L7, benchling, other systems. Can you guys maybe talk for a second, just a little bit more technically, about what your experience has been building on these platforms? Where were the challenges? Where was it easy? I think a lot of the conversation here has been at the higher level, but sort of come down for a second and tell us, like, was it fast to do? Was it quick to do? Was it hard to do? Give us some of your experiences.
Okay, yeah. At first, it took me about 2 to 3 months to kind of get my head around it and how it worked. Of course, I just talked to your tech support, and I remember Luke, you said, just use the edibles, and here's the URL. I'm like, oh, okay. So starting there, then I was able to pull all the data out. And then I just kind of learned and studied how it was more structured. But it's very basic in how you guys organize it. I liked how you organize it by type code, so the process components, the materials, the equipment, each attribute type and parameter, it all comes in a long chain, and they all have their own numbers assigned to each entity that people make. And you can see its parent links and so forth. So I loved how easy that was to pull, and then you can just restructure it into one nice simple template form, and you can put it into any other kind of applications. So in short, no, I didn't have too many problems with it, but I don't know how to write back in the QBD, but that could be a security reason, which is probably good, so I don't overwrite people's data.
Yeah, I can speak. I think my first comment is, if Chaz is in here, give me the documentation. Because, yeah, honestly, working with the API has been, I would say, pretty streamlined. At least pulling out specific information that I require, and then massaging the data into exactly what I like. I believe the existing API calls are pretty robust in what they're providing. You can do filtering, you can call in specific IDs that you're looking for, and all of that information I find pretty simple to kind of pick up, and I would say is pretty industry standard wise, is pretty efficient in what it can do. If I would say one thing is, I would like to see more different varieties of API calls that you can do. Things like multi-imports that you can call from the API, different rights, different access authentication as well would be pretty cool to have as well. I know you guys have been working a lot on providing like security access to different projects and all of that stuff. So it's I definitely see a lot of good progress there.
Who's next up? Oh, come on, I know there's a couple of pharma geeks in the audience. Is Bill Lorenz still here? I know he must have questions about API and data and stuff like that. You got one for us, Bill? No? Okay. Oh, Mahela, let's go.
I guess we still have time. So thank you. Very insightful, very exciting, all of your presentations. But for Bill, the barcode thing just was totally unexpected. So I do want to ask you probably a little more structural, functional deployment of what you did, because I saw the list of collaborators. So obviously you worked very well across functions. But how is that barcode today used by quality to do quality? Help me out, number one, to understand who is establishing those barcodes. How do you go to the concept of the barcodes? And ultimately, who's the most excited about using the barcodes in ensuring that the data is the right data? That's why I said quality.
Yeah.
But how is actually really used? Because it's super exciting. It's a concept that I only use in the supply chain context, and not so much, when you receive materials, obviously everywhere, but not in the context of the entire process. So it's pretty cool what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I first thought about that a year ago, I had no idea how barcodes really worked. So I had to Google and kind of understand. But what it is every record in a database or every row in a data table, it's unique, and you put a unique identifier on it, and that's a barcode. And so the databases are the systems that we have, the data we forward from our facilities and from our supply chain, they already have records. So we take that unique identifier and you say, this is the barcode. And what software does, or algorithms do with any type of text label, they configure it into some type of pattern. Either it's the 2D or that QR barcode that we see. That's just unique to that. And then when a laser or scanner scans it, it transcribes it back to what it was. And that's just simple. So you see barcodes everywhere in grocery stores and everything that it's easy to implement. And so just putting that in the lab, we just played around with it, and people are like, huh, like everything I got, like my salt here for the buffer. Okay. And facilities put barcodes on all the equipment, so they scan that. Supply chain put barcodes on all the stuff that we have. And so we just track that, the unique lot number and everything, into every single experiment. And people don't complain about typing it in or anything, they just scan it in. So when you start experiment, you scan in your equipment, materials, make sure it's all there, make sure nobody is using the equipment because it's reserved, and then you can execute your batch smoothly.
Or did you bring in the barcode use, or it was already in the system when you brought QbDVision?
Facilities and supply chain had their own barcodes made from their own softwares. So with QbDVision, the unique records that we have for those, we give it a barcode. And when it goes to benchling pairs with a software called Bartender. That's a good one. Making bars, yeah.
See a few of them later.
Yeah, so then you should say, okay, here are all my benchling records, make the barcodes. And it just prints them off in the PDF or barcode label. And what's nice is if you have PDF format for your parameters or attributes, they're in a PDF, scan them into the equipment. And then once it's all scanned in the equipment, we know what equipment it is and so forth, we can automate the data capture. So we go to our file system, find it, and enter it in the benchling for them. So we're reducing the amount of human entry, and it improves accuracy. Yep.
Cool. If nobody has anything else, I think there is a hand up there.
Hi. Yeah, so great talks, and I'm actually really excited about the ecosystem characteristic that you're describing here, and would like to ask one or more of you to comment in a forward-looking manner about how you might envision us evolving from point-to-point integrations in the ecosystem to something that's scalable and sustainable, right? In a more, let's say, overarching architecture, right? That's going to allow us to build on and scale this ecosystem approach.
Yeah, I think I'll take a stab at that one. I'll let you guys jump in there. I know, not the expert here, but one of the things that certainly we see as somebody who tries not to be just a vendor to organizations, but also a strategic partner, is that one of the exercises that we often go through is working with companies to define the objectives or outcomes that their business is geared to, depending on phase of the life cycle, specific programs, specific assets, so on and so forth. And then inside of that, defining and really understanding the data products that they need in order to satisfy those business objectives. Then once you do that, you can think about systems and connectivity. But once you really align on that foundational stuff, I think it's quite easy then to just not just look down the weeds into just solutions and tools and connectors, but actually formulating and defining what the business is trying to do and then the data that you need to actually execute on that as certainly the first baby step.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I mean, the ecosystem, I agree with what Lewis is saying, is the ecosystem does require kind of figuring out exactly at what layers you're structuring the data, exactly how you're formulating that information. And I mean, the key thing with kind of formulating that ecosystem is who's requiring the data and why do they need the data, right? I think the biggest question often is, well, we should have data, right? And then, but it's never, why do we need all this information here, or exactly what you want to capture out of the structure of that data, right? And the challenge that we've been trying to work through is, which locations require what data and at what priority the data is required at, right? Because you don't want to have conflicts in, like, you have one system that requires it, but maybe another system requires it before that system's trying to find that hierarchy of information and structuring it out.
Yeah, I would say that the good ecosystem is Alcoa Plus is what you try to follow. So you have one data source, you enter it once, and if you're going to copy and move it, you kind of automate that, the barcodes, and you have a track record, an audit history through these systems. All software as a service has, according to standards, like an audit trail and so forth, and who did things in peer review. It's how information should flow and be less chaotic.
I was just going to comment on that as well too, Pat. I think one of the things that there's a serious debate now emerging, I think, around the idea of the data lake, data warehouse concept versus the data fabric, data mesh concept, right? And I think what we're seeing in these examples is that there are some scenarios where information transfers because it makes sense to do that, and other scenarios where you just create links to where the data is that's important for whatever context you need, but you're not actually moving it around, right? And that's the whole data governance piece. So data integrity, the other side of this is the data integrity is morphing into data governance, right? Because, and that's one of the things we also talk about from a philosophical perspective, is that data integrity shouldn't be it's the outcome, right? So we in the industry, I think, spend a lot of time playing whack-a-mole with data integrity because it's like, oh, we got a problem here, let's take care of it, right? I don't think it's really take care of it, right? Instead of thinking about the behaviors that lead to those bad outcomes, which is really data governance. So as people start to do these kind of things to improve overall data governance, you improve by automatically you improve your data integrity. And I think it starts to tighten the whole thing up in a way that we need to as an industry.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add a bit to the thinking here, right? I think what I'm poking on a little bit is I think there's an opportunity for us to fundamentally rethink what populates this ecosystem in the future, and where does data and functionality of specific types best reside, and then how does it get from point A to point B on demand, right? And so and thinking that through conceptually, and then having that reflected in an overall systems architecture, right? Very important to start that from the beginning, as opposed to try to undo an awful lot of doing things the old-fashioned way, right?
I think that is a great topic to wrap the Q&A on, but obviously everybody up here on stage and everybody in the audience are more than welcome to continue the discussion in the upcoming break, I believe. But don't want to stray too far off the beaten path, and now I will hand it back over to the MC, Luke. So, thank you everybody.